really pleased to talk about the work we've been doing for the CV module. We actually launched this in the Chicago conference, but I know a lot of you weren't there, so let's do this again because it's a really interesting topic. So today we want to talk about what is this CV module, right? What are institutional template, which is what we call it. Why have we built this? What are some of the challenges we are trying to address? What are some of the needs and use cases this actually addresses? What are the concept of the thing we've done? How does it work? What are the synergies with reporting? And what is this not? Because it's also not a fully report module. So, some of the challenges we are seeing with CVs is if you maintain a CV manually, which a lot of researchers do in Word or similar, it's quite time consuming to create these CV documents. So academics are really burdening with the formatting, or some actually might not care about formatting at all, and that then imposes a struggle on you as the institutions who are going to manage all of these CVs. If they should look a certain way, they are oftentimes not looking that way. You have to go back and forth and make it address that. And also, we can see quite a missed opportunity, right? Because there is a lot of the data they probably need in Pure already. So why not be able to use some of this data, right? So what we have done is to create a way for you to create these templates. So it's a smarter way to build a CV. So what we've done is we created the ability to create a template. So you, as admins, can create a template, a CV template or document template, that where you define the different elements, how should it look, how should it, to some degree, the formatting of this, the layouting, the elements that should be included in this, and then it's a centralized managed template. You can then enable that, and then researchers can then use the templates in the CV module as they are used to with those we already have. Now there are just more options, those you have created. So some of these can be used in a set of different options, right? So it could be a narrative CV. We have options for the researchers to enter in text. So if there are more text heavy, we can accompany that. It could be application resumes, right? It could be annual reviews, department activity reports, and so on. There is really a lot of usage here. And I am going to show some examples on this as well. I want to talk about the concept of what it is we have done here. Underneath it all, it is using the report module. That means that if the data is in Pure and you can report on it, you can create a template. So you need to select the data you want to have included in a template. So that could be research output, activities, prices, projects, you name it, right? So all the different elements we have in Pure can actually include those in a template, right? So you can use that data you have in Pure. You can use that data you spend all the time making sure that researchers and your colleagues are actually collecting inside of Pure. You design the template, and then these templates are then being used to create CVs, right? So imagine like in Word where you can have a template, right? And then you create a new document based on a template, and you take a lot of the guesswork out of how it should look, what should be included, and so on. So as mentioned, we are using the report module. It's actually a data story, looking in a slightly different way. So you can use the different elements, the building blocks we offer, right? So it could be lists, and those are extremely useful in a CV, where you can create a list, right? So list my recent publications, for instance, or something like that. You can use key metrics. They can be quite useful in activity reports and stuff like that, right? So how many publications have we produced in the last academic year and so on, right? You can also use the charts if you want to for a CV that might not be that tremendously useful, but it's actually a bit more than just CVs, right? You can use this to build different kind of documents. So it could be something where you, on a departmental level, want to see where we are doing right, and then some of these charts could actually be quite useful. Diving into a bit on how this looks. As you can see, or maybe you can see this, but this is a screenshot on the admin side of the templates. So we revamped how this looks. And you will see that throughout Pure for the foreseeable future. Right? We are going to update how Pure looks and feels. And now the CV module also have had its makeover. This actually enables you to see all the different templates you have. You can enable and disable the templates. A thing we've introduced, which is actually quite useful, is a number. So you can see how many CVs have been generated based off a given template. So you can actually see, are my templates being used? You can, as mentioned, enable and disable these templates, and you can edit the templates. The only ones you actually can edit are these new templates. Those that were in Pure already, so the private, the public, and those we have kind of specialized version, they look and work as they always have done. So once you want to create a new template, you can click the new template, and what you're seeing is something like this. What we have done is that we have created a set of what we think sensible defaults. So we have selected a set of different data tables with information in. It's worth noting that these tables, we have added a filter, so to only look at the most recent data. So it's actually only looking at the current academic year, just to show that this is now possible in the report module also, but it's quite useful in the CV module. So if you're not seeing the data you expect to, then go in and look at your filters you have to include more data, basically. What you're seeing is also the data table, and you can add the different elements you want to include, such as lists of information and anything. I mentioned that this looks slightly different than a typical data store, and most noticeable is the header. You can see there is a header of a name, so when you are going to create a template, you're also going to be prompted to select a person. Does not mean that it's for this person specifically, but it's for us to show you some data to have an idea on how is the CV or the template going to look once you created it, right? So you have to select a person. You can switch between different persons. So if you have some individuals you know that are quite interesting, they have a representative set of the data you want to include, then choose those. You can also choose some that doesn't have that much data, just to see how would that actually look like. So you have options to just pick persons you want to see how does this template look. Again, they're only needed when you create them, right? So once the user go in and actually create a CV, so the users don't have this, it's just a slideshow. But what they do, right, is they just go in what they usually do in the Pure. If they see the personal overview, there are the CV, they can click on that, curriculum vitae. They can add a new CV. They are being presented with the different options, right? So we have the different templates you select from. We've updated that user interface slightly also to actually include the description you can add to it. Then they can just select these new templates you've added, and you will create something like this. So in this instance, I've gone in, I've selected this medical CV template that someone has created. I just click on this, and you will see something like this, where you have a bit of information. So on the element you are seeing here is for instance, it's called a definition list when you are selecting it. The first one where you actually can highlight a value and a property and a value, as for instance the ORCID, what are the ORCID name, the department, and so on. You can see that in a clear and consistent way. If we're going through a couple of more examples. So this is an example of a text widget, where it's quite heavy on the text there, so it's a narrative CV. This allows users to add in text. So we have the text widgets, as you know them from the report module, so they can go in, they can add text. This actually also supports a type of formatting, so you can make a headline, a subheading, they can add text and lists and so on. So what I've actually done here is what you see in the, this here is a list that they maintain manually in here. So that's an option to do that. Obviously then, instead of them doing it in Word, they can do it in Pure, so they have it here. That can be really useful. You can then export this to PDF and also very soon to Word. So they can use it, either just send it or make final changes if they want to in Word, right? So instead of having to do the bulk of work in Word, where they have to export from Pure, Pure can generate this from the outset. You can then finalize it in Word if you need to. Another option is to look at the, so this is the personal profile. We can actually also pull in information. So if you have added, and researchers can more often actually add this themselves, so you can add these lists to the profile page, the personal profile. So under the what's the section is called? It's called, yeah, profile information. Under the curriculum and research interests area, you can actually add this type of information. And you can use this in a CV. So instead of maintaining it manually per CV, you can maintain it on the person profile. When you create the template, you just point to these, they are classified, right? So you can just point to the exact one you want to include, and it's being populated. The really cool thing with this also is that once you have added this, right, next time they open the CV they created, if they've entered in any new information, it will be automatically updated into the CV. They don't have to manually remember to add new information, right? So I think this is a really cool way of ensuring that the information is always up to date. They only have to enter the information once in Pure. You can reuse this, they can reuse it. I think that's really a cool way of engaging with the researchers, saying why should they do this, right? We want to have information in Pure. I think this is now another avenue you can use to entice your researchers to enter data into Pure. As mentioned, we're using the report module to generate this. You do not have to have the report module. So if you haven't bought the report module, but only the CV module, you can still do this. That's an important notion. Also, why do we want to do this? It's to make sure that we can maintain this in our team and make sure that you get value out of your Pure. And it also means that it's a shared capability, right? So meaning that when we do this, when we augment the CV module, reporting users will actually also benefit from this because we are using, as mentioned, the data story. So if we add a new type of visualization that makes a ton of sense CV-wise, that will also be available in the data story and vice versa, right? So when we are updating the data story in the report module, the CV capability will also be updated, right? So it will make it easier for us to bring you value across the different modules you have in Pure, namely reporting and, in this case, CV. I think that's a really valuable notion why we have chosen to do this and what we envision in the future, right? So we have a ton of ideas, and I actually want to interject this here. If we have the UX outside, the UXs are my good colleagues. Today they actually have a couple of different data visualizations for the report module. You can go out, have a view, have a look, and vote on some of these. We actually also have some on the CV module where we have some papers. You can go in and have a look and have some comments and ideas. Are there anything here you want to change? If you have seen this before, if not, you can still have a look. But I think this is a good opportunity to come with some ideas and inspiration as to what could really bring this, make this module much more usable for you. So, also important to say what is this, what it is and what it isn't. So the CV functionality I'm talking about here sits in the CV module. So you have to have the CV module to be able to do this. It's already released, as mentioned, so if you have the CV module already, you can go home after this session, or preferably after the conference, so do stick around. You can go home back to your institution and actually start to have a go at this. Create some templates, see how they work, interact with your departments, your researchers, or maybe the heads of departments. What is it that they would really like, right? But it's also not a replacement for the report module, so you do not have access to the entirety of the report module. You cannot generate a lot of reports and export those to Excel and everything, so for that you would need the report module. So that means there is no advanced reporting, there is no sharing, no scheduling, and no role-based access. With that being said, right? On the role side, when you create a CV and the researchers go in and click the CV, it's obviously only their data that will be included in the CV, just to remove any confusion around that. So looking at where we are and where we want to be, it's available now. We have made a material available. So you can download in the app, you can see this presentation. So the getting started is a link. It will bring you to our help center. There we have created documentation on how to get started, how to create templates, how for researchers to use set templates. And if you have any suggestions or if it's difficult to read and understand that documentation, please reach out to us. We want to improve it so you can make the most of what we've done here. It's also not done. We want to add more into this. And some of the ideas we have are, for instance, different ways of formatting the output. It could be more filters on the actual widgets. So right now you have to add the filters on the underlying data tables, but it could be really useful to be able to add filters directly on the widget you're seeing, right? So a list, but only show me the contribution to journal articles, for instance. It could also be an import and export of these templates, right? So if you have a shared use case in a group, that could be in the UK, for instance, or Denmark, or somewhere you have a close capability where it's shared, right? Then it would make sense if you could share these between business schools or something. If you have something where the commonalities and the similarities are quite high, it would make sense for you to be able to import and export a template. Bulk CV generation is also quite an interesting topic that we want to explore. So now you have the ability to create a template. In order to use these templates, it's a manual process, so the researchers themselves have to go into Pure, click create new CV, use the correct template. We could also imagine that you have a template and you want to promote that. So it could be either you generate them in bulk for downloading purposes, if it's for annual review, performance review or something like that. But it could also be that you want to promote it, so you sort of create it on behalf of a set of researchers. So they all of a sudden have the CV. You could go out and say, hey, we created a CV for you. Would that be something you would be interested in using and promoting? It could be organizational limits. So right now, the templates you create are available and visible to all researchers, all of them. It would make sense to be able to say that this template only makes sense for this set of the hierarchy, right? So there might be some changes or some differences in the CV needs for, say, the STEM and some of the SSH type of research, or some other permutation of the organization hierarchy. Right now, they are limited. And speaking of limits, we currently do not have any limits on how many templates you can create. There is also no limits on how often the research can create a CV of the same template. So if they want, they can create multiple versions of a document or CV on the same templates. And with that,